everything important going on in business that can affect me and my company. Everything I need to know. It gives me a running start every business day. I can't afford to be less informed than anybody I do business with, outside my company or in it. The Journal makes sure I'm not. Excuse me. Got to do my required reading.
Get all the business news you need when you need it. Get the Wall Street Journal. Delivered every business day for 6 months for $47. Just 37 cents a day. Phone toll free 800-453-4806. That's 6 months, $47, only 37 cents a day. Phone 800-453-4806 now.
I'm in the business of digging up outrages and shouting them from the rooftops. There are no outrages more despicable than the mindless hatred and harassment of minorities. I regret to report that bigotry is rising in America like a stink from the sewers. One of the most vulnerable targets, the Jews. The Anti-Defamation League keeps book on anti-Semitism. In 1978, it reported only 40 incidents across the country. In 1979, the number tripled. There were 129 incidents. In 1980, another tripling brought the number to 489. And in 1981, 1,324 anti-Semitic incidents were reported. At the neighborhood level, bigotry can be emotion kindling. Sylvia Donnelly is a victim of prejudice. She had a house on Long Island in New York, one of the wealthiest sections of the country, which also had one of the highest rates of anti-Semitic incidents. Donnelly told my associate Terry Repack how deep was the hurt she felt when her neighbor ostracized her and harassed her family. Sylvia Donnelly's only offense? She's Jewish.
Started by having garbage thrown into our yard, beer bottles, a dog being put into our yard to use the yard as a bathroom, a garage window being broken. And we thought that in time this would stop if we ignored it. We didn't know the reason for it, but we thought it would stop. And it didn't stop. It got worse, progressively worse.
I was assaulted by 4 people in front of my yard. 2 of them were guys, two of them were girls. My mother was there. My mother was also assaulted. And I required medical attention. I had injuries to my neck, my arm, my eye, my hand.
What effect did this have on your life?
I'm bitter for many reasons. One of the reasons is I taught my children that violence is wrong and justice will prevail. And the judicial system taught my children that I was wrong. There's no justice for Jews.
The flames of bigotry are spreading in all directions. In Boston last weekend, the Ku Klux Klan staged a rally that turned into a near riot. Outraged protesters drove the 24 Klan members out of Boston. Rabbi Nathan Korf lives in Milton, Massachusetts, on the edge of Boston. Not long ago, his synagogue was vandalized. A holy Torah, which had been in his family for 200 years, was doused with fluid and set on fire. The police never found out who did it.
And that Torah survived the Jewish pogroms in Russia, only to come to the States to perish. And we've had a number of incidents that were reported to the police during the years where swastika signs were drawn on the sidewalk, where dead animals were put on the front steps in front of the sanctuary, where somebody would open up the door and say kikes and run off, incidents of broken windows. We thought that by sweeping it under the rug, we were doing the right thing. But maybe if we hadn't swept it under the rug, maybe this wouldn't have happened.
Who is behind these acts of hatred? I asked Leonard Zakim of the Anti-Defamation League.
The kinds of incidents indicate that they're not taking place at the hands of extremist groups like the Ku Klux Klan and neo-Nazis, but rather they're being conducted by people who would ordinarily be our next-door neighbors or perhaps their children.
Today, these odious occurrences are becoming commonplace with the potential for running amok. I discussed the problem with an unlikely authority. Vidal Sassoon is a world-famous hairdresser. He heads a multi-million-dollar cosmetic concern. But behind all the glamour and glitter, he's an authority on bigotry. He's lived through it. He's also studied it. Here's what Sassoon has to say about bigotry in America.
I don't think we'll have the outbreaks that they're having in Italy, France, Mexico, Argentina, where terrifying things are happening in essence. Here it's a little different. You have natural hatreds. It comes out in different ways when you have unemployment, when you have second-class minds running first-class countries. You are going to have this kind of bigotry. It, at this moment, isn't as dangerous because of the society that we live in, because of this pluralism that we live under.
Is the leadership of Ronald Reagan failing?
Miserably.
Is this responsible for some of the anti-Semitism that we've seen the last 2 years?
Well, if it's responsible for unemployment to the extent that it is, it will create bigots of all kinds, and the Jews will suffer as much as most. But we are sitting on a continent that has enormous quantities of wealth, energy of its people, which is extraordinary, and a constitution that is unbeatable. I really mean that, because I became a citizen 4 years ago after deeply thinking about it. Why would I want to become an American citizen? I'd lived in Israel, I'd lived in England, I was born in England. I have an Israeli citizenship anyway, because I was there in '48 in the army. But America meant something very different to me, because essentially the majority are caring. The majority of Americans are caring.
And I agree with him. When I return, I'll report on defense executives and their excessive salaries. $11,300,000 Americans can't find work. Millions more have had their pay cut. Yet many corporate executives have never had it so good. Now, this is true particularly of the nation's defense contractors. The top executives are stuffing their pockets with salary increases. I can name half a dozen executives who now draw more than $1 million a year. Harry Gray of United Technologies, Paul Thayer of LTV, Raymond Hay, also of LTV, Thomas Jones of Northrop. Then there's T.A. Wilson of Boeing. He laid off 3,000 workers last year. He's threatening to fire another 6,000 workers this year. The only way to save their jobs, he pleads, is for the government to give his company more contracts. But he didn't wait for more contracts before he raised his own pay by $100,000. His total take is now close to $1 million. Now, most of the money that goes to these defense contractors, of course, comes from the taxpayers. One Pentagon auditor challenged the excessive wage increases of a major contractor, Pratt & Whitney. His report is classified secret, but I've seen it. It accuses Pratt & Whitney of seeking unreasonable salary raises. Did the Pentagon object to the increases? No. It tried to fire the auditor who made an issue of them. The courageous auditor is George Spanton. My associate Greg Rushford called on him at the Pratt Whitney plant in West Palm Beach, Florida.
I found myself practically on the road to California. I was transferred to California effective September 15th, and that was a surprise to me in as much as, number one, they were aware that within a year or so I was planning a retirement. I was quite upset. It's an emotional thing to work for an agency for as long as I have, and then because, as I felt then and now, because we did too good a job, it was too effective an audit, I got the very clear impression that I was out of line.
But the Air Force Secretary, Vern Orr, seemed to agree with Spanton. Orr wrote a memo declaring, "It is absolutely ludicrous to expect all elements of government and all retirees and pensioners from government to undergo strict limitations of their government receipts, while at the same time, through our contracts, we pay substantially larger increases to labor forces building our weapons systems." At first, Spanton thought he had acquired a powerful ally who would now back the auditors.
We seemed vindicated in what was possibly thought to be an outlandish audit position. We seemed to be so way out. We were doing something so radical. Then along came the Air Force Secretary and said his recommendations were even somewhat tougher than ours.
Yes, the memo is tough. There's just one problem. The Pentagon is ignoring it. Not a single general was willing to go on camera and defend the cost savings ideas.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We're from Jack Anderson Confidential Television. Will you let us in, please?
Yes, just put right up on the sign here.
Thank you.
I can't take you in with your cameras. The best I can do is have Mr. Spanton come out here to talk to you, or take you in alone.
Well, we'd like to interview with Pratt & Whitney.
That's what my instructions do.
We then sought comment from Pratt & Whitney, but you can see what happened when Rushford visited the West Palm Beach plant. Why isn't the Pentagon willing to hold down the salaries paid by defense contractors? I think I know the answer. It can be found in this foot-high stack of papers. There are 1,845 names here. Each name belongs to a high-ranking military officer or defense official who left the Pentagon last year to work for a defense contractor. The people in the Pentagon simply don't want to bite the hand that's about to feed them. So instead, they bite the taxpayers' hands. Next week, a look at how an American community was forced to live with the armed entourage of an Arab security chief. I'm Jack Anderson in Washington.
Jack Anderson Confidential is a Jack Berry and Dan Enright production in association with Able Communications.
I've never handled a gun before in my life. Matter of fact, when they was teaching me how to close the hammer on a gun while the chamber was loaded, me and my finger went through an ordeal.
You qualified in a day?
Yes.
25 rounds?
Yes.
How dangerous is it for the public, I'm saying?
It's very dangerous. It's very dangerous.
If you get into a situation where your life or the public's life is endangered, what would you do then?
Go.
You would just leave?
Leave.